Tiago Fortes did a second brain summit.
Yeah, that's coming out in June, isn't it?
No, that's the book. He's
Yeah.
in a online summit.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I guess I haven't been following. I have been waiting. I've been sort of waiting and hoping that that the book was going to include all the, pretty much everything I needed.
Yeah. This is like a free event thing happening that he's putting on with like August Bradley and Maria Polding and Brian Jenks and a few others.
Oh, good. Well, I should probably pay attention to that. I was not aware.
It's on secondbrainsummit.com.
Okay, great.
I've already pre-ordered the book as well. So
yeah, I think it'd be.
Yeah, I think it'd be good for another book club session.
Yes, I think. I think I'll plan on doing that for the June. Let's look at. I'm going to look up Second Brain Summit.
Yeah, .com.
There we go. Okay, 14th to 18th of March.
Yeah.
Cool.
And it's totally free, apparently.
That's great. Wow, a lot of big names.
August Bradley, Thomas Frank. Yeah.
Nick, and okay, good.
Thierry Poulin.
Yeah.
Three of the big Notion people.
Good.
Mm-hmm.
Good. I'd like to. I enjoy talking to or just listening to or reading things that Eleanor has to add to the conversation as well.
Mm-hmm. Oh.
Okay, so so that I'll just put that in the chat for everybody. So I've been a little bit less up to date than I would like to be, because I sort of had a bit of this cold this week, so I was spending time trying to sleep a lot. But it's today's my daughter's birthday, and she's got a birthday party at noon. So I'm trying to I'm a little bit scattered, but I was looking forward to kind of talking once more about kind of what's going on in the vault, because there seems to be quite a bit. And it's been very interesting. Tracy, I've been reading your notes again, and kind of your the whole sort of the rest of the journey. So do you want to talk at all about that to kind of start us out?
You always do this, Dan.
Not to put you on the spot.
Put you on the spot.
Pass the baton. I don't know. It's so I had a bunch of technical snafus this week, so I was pretty preoccupied. I definitely am working on this in fits and starts. So I get an inspiration and run for 24 hours and write all kinds of stuff, and then forget about it for 3 days or whatever.
Okay.
Let's see.
That's fair. Well, that was actually why I called on you, because you did sort of drop that big note, the big questions note in there.
Oh, well, that was actually more geared towards the next phase, and kind of selecting which book we're going to read next. So I realized when I looked at the books, I was like, I'd be happy with any of these. But in your Twitter thread, I had posted, a couple of suggestions. So I felt like I needed to support that option, but I don't really care, actually. But what I do care about is the kind of the big issues that are most captivating for me, which is what it was, just sort of a brain dump into that note about kind of the big questions. And then I tried to organize them in such a way that they capture kind of different constellations
Yeah.
of questions and thoughts. But
yeah, I've been thinking a lot about that, about your sort of your train of thought about the deciding when you're sourcing back or sourcing into a conversation with what you're looking at. Chris in the chat is that, how does everybody feel about the phrase second brain? It seems
Chris is such a stirrer.
it does seem a little marketing oriented. It's it was actually, I think initially, Eric, it was sort of the marketing that pulled me in too, but I'm not sure that I really, once, I'm not sure that I believe that much that in buying a solution, and I guess maybe that's also something that I found interesting in the vault this week, was sort of that idea that that maybe that maybe single solutions and these promises of magic, and again I'm riffing off of what you were writing, Tracy, are that the magic is not exactly what it I think that Patrick says it doesn't matter what you call it. There's an idea contained in there that I think is, and I think that is a point that is well taken about scaffolding. Although we can kind of talk about and speculate how people before they had written records, how they might have done that. But I think that we could also, that even if we kind of went down that kind of through that exploration, we would still possibly come to the same place, right? That it would be a very effortful project, and that it would leave us in a place where where we needed some type of scaffolding, whether it was written or otherwise. And if you're thinking, if we're thinking about the types of things that people have used as scaffolding other than written, I'm not sure, is that really that much of a difference? Go ahead, Tracy.
I don't know why my space bar doesn't unmute anymore. I really missed that. For me, I think in this whole, if I've learned anything this whole month, it's that the magic and the scaffolding and the tool, what it does is make me enjoy the process. So the magic is actually building the habit, building the process, building the kind of comfort zone with just constantly, recording and working with and sitting with and cultivating my digital garden. Right. Mm-hmm. So I think what's been resonating in my mind all week is what I think it was it Justin was talking about. It really needs to slow down. Like the thinking process needs to slow down. We need to stop worrying about capturing everything and connecting everything, but really focus on how the tool helps your process and enjoying your process. And that's where the magic is. But it's a slow process. It's actually kind of a slow building. It's like, plants grow slowly. You can't watch them grow, Right. It takes a season and a whole annual cycle. So that's what I'm really leaning into. So I think, it's less for me of a second brain, as I really like the more organic metaphors better. Not that brains aren't organic, but kind of more the digital garden, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I do appreciate, I guess, the part of the digital second brain thing that I really like is the connections, because I've started getting I started getting little reels of documents. I've been reading through, I've been scanning like crazy, and then and processing and reading through a bunch of old radical newspapers from the 1830s, and this one actually is from the Bishopsgate Institute in London, actually, and it's a bunch of radical stuff, and I had and really it has been, the thing that it's reminded me is that I just love looking at this stuff, and that's been kind of the moment, right? And the motivation, and the thing that's made it very easy for me is that I've been just driven to scan the whole thing. I yesterday was the last day of school before break, and yesterday evening and I picked this up yesterday at the library, and I scanned the whole thing yesterday. And I started reading it and transcribing letters from a letter from 1849 today, that I think, that is sort of, that has been very, that's been the thing that, that sort of reminded me that, yeah, it's the content that really kind of draws me, but the connections between them are really the interesting thing that I think this tool is really going to help me with, right? Because I have these, what I'm doing is my project is sort of tracing this transatlantic radicalism of kind of the and actually it's sort of, there was an echo of it in that whole Enlightenment Kandiaronk Lahontan thing that Graeber and Wengrow were talking about in their first and last chapters in the last book club, but but it kind of it jumps back and forth across the Atlantic, and it's been hard to kind of nail down and to put these people in the same place, right? But and also they're not only radicals, but they're secular radicals, so they're super out there on the fringes, right? And not that many people except Edward Royal in York has written about them, and so there's not as much. So it's kind of an empty space, and it's hard to sort of pin people down and connect them. But what I'm finding is I'm finding these little trails, and this is helping me to sort of to connect the dots and to actually kind of create a trail. Now, can you talk some more about geotagging and what you were thinking about, Tracy, as far as kind of tracing historical ideas through time and space?
Yeah, I wish Lewis were here. I now remember just now that he had posted that I think in the second right meeting, which I missed, that he had discussed that. So I need to go back and look at his technique for actually how to do that. But yeah, one of the things studying the early church fathers that really struck me was that you had these centers, right? You had, cities, which were, or the metropolis, which was kind of the center of the fringe, groups around it. And then there were battles between the different cities with different, doctrines and ideas and issues and controversies floating around. And, usually history of ideas is treated, kind of by period. Right. In this period of time, this century, this was going on, then this century, but the geographic connections are downplayed. And I think I ended up thinking that this is incredibly important to understand what's going on and who's actually talking to whom, because, prior to the age of the internet or the telegraph or railroads, the only way you talk to someone, you could send a letter, right? Or if you actually were going to talk to them in person, you had to go there, and it might take you weeks or months to get there. So there ended up being, connections. And it's like you're saying, this transatlantic connection between London and New York, or, like that's who's talking to each other. So of course, that's where the ideas are connecting.
Yeah.
So what you see in your primary texts, on this side of the Atlantic and this side of the Atlantic, that may even be closer than what you see, in New York and I don't know. I mean, probably DC and Philadelphia and Boston are pretty well connected.
Yeah.
But, if you get, California or something like that, or, Chicago or Milwaukee or something like that, that those networks are going to be very different. So, working historically, working in the history of ideas, unlike today, where place seemingly has come to matter little, although maybe you could debate that in some ways, or maybe we have a different concept of place, a different concept of locale. Maybe it's more virtual or something. But yeah, that's what I'm thinking. And especially tied with primary texts or any discussions where you really need to tag that idea into a place as well as a time.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, it actually, I have been surprised, just with these people in the first half of the 19th century. So kind of before railroads are really well established in, even in the Northeast. People are bopping back and forth across the Atlantic like crazy. It's blowing my mind, like Frances Wright, she goes and she comes and she comes back and she comes back and, she's all over the place. Robert Owen, apparently, especially, was also, he was like, where is he today? Where's he speaking? Because there's a whole bunch of things, and I've been having to, it's been interesting, actually putting geographical kind of tags on those. It was, and people made, I guess people made a lot of, I shouldn't be surprised, I guess, that people made a lot of trips, but my guy that I was particularly interested in Western Massachusetts. I find him down in New York City in 1829, like long before I ever knew that he was, that he was sort of traveling. And people used to go to, apparently people used to go to these parties and celebrate Thomas Paine's birthday and drink toasts and stuff. It's kind of uncovering a whole interesting lifestyle kind of a thing, as well as just, this is sort of how these, how these ideas kind of made it from one place to another. Excuse me. So, so that has been kind of super fun. Also of course, there are personalities, a lot of personalities. Of one of the natives that the Pilgrims met was, Tisquantum or Squanto. Actually, the reason, he's in the New England Thanksgiving tradition, he's the good Indian who taught them how to survive and plant corn and all of that. And he had been, the reason he spoke English was because he had been picked up a decade earlier and enslaved and sold into slavery in Spain, and somehow made his way to England, and then somehow also made his way back. But when he gets back to Patuxet, his village, it's gone, and the Pilgrims have settled on the site. And so he has to kind of throw in with them because he's lost his people, and but his enemies are still sort of out there too. Charles Mann is really, really good. Mann is, and it's kind of funny too, because I went to UMass, and one of my advisors knew him, and I probably saw him in the public library, because apparently that's where he did a lot of work, but we never connected. But he really did. He did a lot with that, and especially with that early. That early environmental history. What I'm looking at is that guy up there is trying to destroy things. He's found some paper towel, and he's gonna I'm not even going to try to get him down from there because he'll just fall on my head and scratch me. So I'm just, so in any case, we've got, so it's kind of funny. We come back to where we began and know the place for the first time, right? And so it's the magic is actually enjoying the stuff that we're working on. I do think that the tool is helping me really, and maybe it's just the shininess of putting something into the tool. And maybe if I take the paper towel away from him, he'll jump down. Come on, buddy, get it over there. That's where it is. That it has been. I've actually started. My wife is always on me to not do quite as much of this. That I've, that I'm putting it out there in the world. But it actually sometimes it pays off. I subscribe to a couple of those research things, and I think academia. I think that's what it is called. Notified me yesterday. Said, "Is this you?" Because there was a reference to me, and there's another deal also who's some type of medical researcher in South America. So oftentimes it's not me, but this one actually was, and it was somebody who had been, who had found some of my stuff that I did that I just kind of threw out there into the public space, and had used it. So that was kind of cool. Yeah, academia.edu. So what else is happening in the what's the pattern, the heuristic and pattern recognition thing?
I was just thinking, everyone, about this kind of idea about continuing this book club and new texts. And do people have thoughts about using? Would the idea be to create another vault in Obsidian? And are there ways that we might use it differently in a collaborative sense, or are there ways that we can do it? I'll say better or worse, or just differently. Maybe is a better way of saying it. The next time around, given for some of us, but even just this group here, what we've learned or what the experience has been like for this latest vault, particularly if it's not. If it's a book that's not specifically focused on note taking. I'm curious about that.
Yeah, that's kind of one of the reasons I was thinking about sort of bopping back and forth from a note taking book to an actual text that we could take notes on. I would be kind of interested in seeing if we can do something that's sort of akin to what you might do in hypothesis, right? Where somebody makes a note of something, and then other people can react and comment and kind of get a conversation going. In this one, we sort of did our thing in our folders, and then kind of went looking for okay, what's somebody else doing in their folder, and when we have and that can be and that seemed to work. But on the other hand, it seems to be kind of like every time you do that, it's a deep dive into what Tracy's doing in her folder, right? Or or whatever. If I open up another one, Simon, yours, or Chris.
It was a little out of date, I think, is the words you're looking for.
Well, I haven't put a lot in mine in the last week or so either. But the idea that that if you if you dare to like open Chris's, it's like holy crap.
So do you mean hypothesis instead of Obsidian, or as well as?
Well, no, I'm wondering if there's a way to use Obsidian in more of a kind of a back and forth way. And I mean, it's been a long time since, I mean, it really was like RBC2 that I stopped paying attention on the Rome side because it got too confusing for me with the, the different sort of transclusion tricks and block quoting and all of that. But a way, if we had a text that we were sort of commenting on, and maybe, now that we've sort of identified, the types of things that we're saving as, as permanent notes, and that, and the types of ideas and kind of the size and the context and all of that, maybe it makes sense to try to do that, right? To try to say, well, okay, we'll put, we'll have a kind of an open space where, for a chapter of a book, we look at, we post our thoughts and then discuss them. Maybe the idea would be that everybody, kind of grab something out of a chapter that they want to talk about and sort of throw it out there as a provocation.
I spent a little bit of time this week thinking about the affordances of some of these tools, and it was kind of interesting seeing some of the back and forth using hypothesis on that one paper, that there were some interesting conversations that I don't think would have existed in Obsidian the way most of us have been using Obsidian. Although you can get a deeper dive into someone's thinking on a particular subject, but it doesn't make doing back and forth conversations easy, whether you're transcluding or not.
Right.
Or doing small little back and forths, but it's, that's the same kind of thing. If you're doing something in a more Zettel-Kosten sort of method, Obsidian is tough because it gives you a huge page to kind of fill up, and you can write a lot and it'll go forever. Versus if you're using index cards, the index card forces you into greater concision because it's a smaller space. Or I kind of get that same thing in using hypothesis, is it starts out as a small box and you can resize it and you can scroll down if you want, but because it's a small box, it is almost limiting because the visual says, hey, I'm a small box, don't put a lot in me.
Yeah.
So it's, how do the tools you're using force you to think a certain way or not, or allow you flexibility to go in either direction?
Yeah. Yeah, it is. I think it would be an artificial kind of a thing in Obsidian. I'm not sure that I'm convinced it's not worth trying though. Yeah, that's the question, is if we, I tend to highlight in Kindle, and that finds its way, the highlights find their way into my, into my my vault. But what I'm looking for, maybe I think in the next thing would be, something where we stipulate that, we're all getting from reading and highlighting, or reading with a pen and a notepad, to sort of processing those notes and then to getting them into the vault in a way that they can be sort of talked about.
Right. I'm going to respond to some stuff in the chat. So I found this plugin in the Obsidian forum to integrate Obsidian with this sort of note-taking social network called Second, which I'd never heard of before. I've not actually seen it demonstrated, but I think the idea is you make notes in your own vault and you can push them into a public or private workspace in Second, and then people can comment and respond to those, or I'm not sure, but maybe also even integrate them into their own vault. And it doesn't automatically spider out and grab your whole vault because you've linked to it in that particular note that you shared. it's kind of a completely different paradigm to what we've been doing in this community vault. But if somebody wants to, like, over the next week, try to pilot a 2 or 3 person just like demo to see if it's workable at all, I would be interested in doing that.
Yeah, I'm not finding it easily, actually. Yeah.
It's a community plugin now. I see it's gone from being just a repo to a community plugin.
But is it, I mean, is Second a thing in and of itself? And is there a plugin to connect it with?
Second, sekund.io. If you point your browser to that,
okay,
you'll see it's a peer-to-peer, I guess, second brain kind of thing. I've never heard of it before.
Oh, there we go.
Justin posted that.
Okay, thanks. Oh, did I miss that?
No.
Did you post that in the?
Tracy, rather.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it went by in the chat. But yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, we could try that. WhatsApp like groups allow you to follow on specific topics. That could really be cool. I have not, I have to admit, I have not really felt that comfortable in the Obsidian Discord. I've sort of, it always sort of feels like there's way too much going on, and there's, yeah, I got the cards too. I just got the Rocketbook cards.
If it works like it seems to work, it means that we would have effectively a sort of shared space that isn't kind of collecting everyone's notes. So it would be a little bit more, for want of a better word, curated in terms of a kind of conversation. That as I've written something that I actually really like to hear, I don't know, someone's Gregory to respond to, or even just the whole group. It seems like it just might be, yeah, I'm kind of curious, quite.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe that is a project for kind of the next book club, is to read a book, an outside text, a non-note taking related text, and try to figure out, and work the kinks out of a way of kind of communicating about it.
So we also have the Discord that I think, was it Nate set up for just this group. So I'll sign up for Second or whatever it takes to try and get it working on my own vault, and I'll post in that Discord later today how that went, and if it's worth anybody else bothering to try to do that, because it looks so new. I don't even know if it's like the sign up process functions. So it's like super early tech. I don't know. That's why I've been hesitant to try it out.
Yeah. Does not support publishing a digital garden. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, will definitely be a plan on the bleeding edge. So what book should we read? Anybody feel strongly?
Well, I mean, I kind of wouldn't mind something that's a little bit about Ukraine area, but also I kind of agree that all the books you posted sounded interesting in general, for sure. So
yeah. Are we? Is there anything that, I mean, go ahead, Tracy.
I would suggest that if we're going to simultaneously read sort of a real book, a historical book, or whatever we decide on, and work on prototyping some new collaborative highlighting Obsidian plugin system, that the book itself not get in the way of doing that. So maybe a little, I don't want it to be too simple or too boring or too shallow. I mean, I want it to be a real book worth reading and really taking notes on and grappling with, but maybe it should be a little shorter, a little less complicated in its structure, something like that. So like maybe not Dawn of Everything, like kind of book, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, since what has brought us together is sort of this interest in note-taking and knowledge management, and I think Chris seems to be the most knowledgeable in terms of sort of the historical development of this kind of approach to thinking and scholarship. Perhaps Chris could recommend a book that is sort of significant on its, you know, in this space, you know, but not a recent book, not a modern book, but something that kind of would be sort of significant background for us in advancing our thinking about these sorts of topics. I don't know, just a thought, just throwing it out there.
Yeah.
I have a bibliography of stuff, and a lot of it, you know, that may be of interest on that border is, you know, work on the history of kind of information and knowledge. So one of my favorites lately is Ann Blair, who is a scholar at Harvard who studied, you know, ideas like information overload since, you know, the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, you know, with the rise of printing. So she's got a really good book called Too Much to Know. You know, it's essentially on how to handle the information overload that occurred roughly with the beginning of Gutenberg, and goes from there. Another one that's somewhat related, and I don't think they actually used the word Zettelkasten in it, but Andrei Krajewski, who's a German writer, has a book from MIT Press called Paper Machines.
Right.
And he follows the history of kind of the index card and the library card catalog and its intellectual history going into the early 20th century with the use of, you know, edge punched cards in the beginning of the computer space. But those are personal interests I have, and I would not want to impose them on, you know, anyone else who doesn't want to jump into that, you know, rabbit hole with both feet. So those are probably two that are the closest. And then I think in the vault I mentioned a third, Annie Murphy put out a book called The Extended Mind, and she's a nonfiction science writer who has been following psychology and memory and mind studies for 2 decades. Just put out a book last summer that looks at kind of memory and the human mind and ties the last quarter century of psychology research together in some interesting ways. But I'm only a chunk of the way through it at this point, so I won't presume to.
It does advertise itself as thinking outside the brain, so it's got that metaphor going for it.
There's an Ezra Klein podcast from last summer where he interviews her. If you want the short version of whether this is interesting to you or not, I would check that out. It certainly got me like, I have to read this book, or at least read the beginning of this book to decide if I can read this book.
I mean, she writes in a very comprehensible style. It's not a super dense. She's not a David Graeber sort of writer, and this is a book that's geared more towards a broad general populace rather than a super scientific niche audience.
Yeah, I'm looking at the table of contents. Thinking with our bodies is part 1, sensations, movement, gesture. Part 2, thinking with our surroundings, natural spaces, built spaces, space of ideas. And then part 3 is thinking with our relationships, experts, peers, and groups. Sounds like an interesting way to organize it. I'd be up for that. It's it's the extended mind, and then the subtitle is The Power of Thinking Outside the Brain.
Yeah, I actually have the audiobook version. I don't know if that would hinder taking notes.
That actually is an incentive for me. Yeah. I would, because I usually get them both. I usually get the Kindle and the audiobook, especially when it offers, oh yeah, the $7.49 audible narration. I'll take it. So
I've read it, but I would really recommend it. But it's certainly it's only tangentially related, in my opinion, to it's Andy Murphy, Paul Torren, to kind of note taking. It's certainly it probably calls into question Tiago's use of the word brain as something outside of us, as a kind of metaphor, and sort of invites other metaphors, you might say, about what's sort of beyond our skin, if you like. But I don't. It's like I said, it's only sort of tangentially related to for people who are interested in kind of knowledge management. So I mean, perhaps closer than a Graeber book, but then maybe we're in for something. It's going to be very difficult for us to decide, I guess, as I'm listening, because Too Much to Know sounds great. So all those books that people were suggesting to me sound really interesting. And yeah, anyway, I'm not helping that much, but.
Well, the other thing that we could
how do we decide maybe is another question. Well, given these various options, so like.
Yeah, the other thing that we could do that I think Maggie really was talking up in the last book club was kind of a synoptic, read them both kind of thing, which is an additional level, an additional layer of complexity, but we could try that too. And maybe we do, maybe actually then if we would go for longer and not try to jam it all in very, very quickly.
It does occur to me that, and I asked the question in the chat about whether this extended mind is related to the embodied cognition kind of research. But if it is, I mean, would there be a way of connecting that with sort of environmental history? So history that's told not just as intellectual history that's not just political history, but actually takes account of the physical environment, the biological environment. So it's like, a society has its environment and the individual has its body and its physical aspects of cognition and its scaffolding, right? It's tools, it's notes, it's libraries, it's the paperwork kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, if you did something synoptic like that, I mean, again, like you said, would kind of multiply the complexity of the content itself. At the same time, we're trying to test a new tool. But I mean, that would be really interesting to, it's also not ping-ponging, right? Do one kind of focus on method and the technique, and then actually look at whatever history we're interested in for whatever reason. But actually try to see if there's a connection between the two, like the historical development of these research and writing and thinking methodologies. And then maybe, I don't know, I'm swirling out of control now, but it strikes me that like something like environmental history, there's a similar sort of trend there to extend beyond just the human culture, sociality into something physical. And if the extended mind stuff is also like embodied cognition, it's basically saying, how does your body help you think? How does your environment help you as a society, or hurt you, or
right.
constrain you, something like that.
Yeah, that sounds very interesting. I'm not sure what to think.
The table of contents of the Blair book, Too Much to Know, looks interesting, just because one of the chapters is note-taking as information management is
Yeah.
But so that, but yeah, it's hard to know what direction to go in.
Yeah, and I don't know how to actually pull in the embodied cognition stuff, but I think, yeah, executive decision time. Why don't we try the two? Why don't we try doing the two, adding a conversational element to the vault and to our collective note-taking process, and make that our project. And if we find an opening to do the, to a better understanding, or something that shows us a direction into the other, that we kind of okay. So does that sound fair?
Fun.
All right. Cool. All right, then I will. So then it's Ann Blair, Too Much to Know, and Extended Mind. And I will get some, and I'll have a chat with Maggie and see if she's got some tips about organizing that, organizing the whole thing. Wow, it's more, everything's more expensive in pounds. So Too Much to Know is, I was looking at Extended Mind. Let me go back to Too Much to Know. How much is it in? Oh, I see. Wow, yeah, that one is a little bit more over here too. Huh. Maybe that's
Yale University Press. That's why.
That's why. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe that's an interlibrary loan book.
God damn Ivy League.
Yes. Yeah. And they don't even do a good job of marketing the books, I tell you. They're like, oh, sorry, Dan, we didn't sell enough. We're gonna have to remainder your book. It's like I could never even get hold of anybody there during COVID. So I think they're just pretending. They're pretending to be in business.
If that's the case, you should totally call them up and say, I want, 100 copies of the remainder version, and then sell them out of the back of your trunk as you tour.
Yeah. They did offer me a sweet deal on remainders. So yeah. And they said, and it's kind of weird because they want to have it both ways, right? They say, well, we'll keep it in some stock, right? And we'll keep it on our, it's part of the Agrarian Studies series, for crying out loud. So they're holding, so really what they're doing is they're holding on to the copyright, right? So, which I suppose I could just, I have a 6-month window. I can say, no, what, thanks, I'd like it back. But I don't know. It's weird. I might get that one from the library. So, all right, having decided that, what else do we want to? That's interesting. So we won't be, so it'll be.
Well, one thing is about how we go about testing this community plugin. Second, thanks, Greg.
Yeah, that sounds interesting.
Yeah, it does. But I'm not. I think we're going to have to just kind of wade through that slowly. Oh, Nate, yeah, you want to You want to fill us in?
What am I filling you in on?
On second.
On what?
Oh, that didn't come from you originally?
I'm the one who found that. I was paying Nate to help Simon with the Discord.
Okay. I'm sorry. Discord. Whenever I follow those Discord links, it actually asks me to sign up for Discord again. So it doesn't. I guess that's because I don't really ever leave Discord open on my system. So maybe I'll do that first and then click through the link.
But it does sound like the second is a kind of a community version of Obsidian Publish. I mean, just from looking at the description. So I'm happy to work with anyone, Justin, to sort of kick the tires and see how it works.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Cool. So then we're gonna. All right.
So like we're kicking the tires. We might find that they're flat and it's not worth driving. So Dan, you may want to have the backup of just like doing this, either continuing with this vault and renaming it, or making a new one, and we'll start again, but try like a different engagement style or something.
Right. What did you just add? Oh.
A new vault without folders, I guess, is what.
Well,
asset folders, but not note folders, not named folders for each of us.
Right. I think I might just make a new vault, because I think that this would be interesting to people who, I think that what we've done in just, in these 4.5, 5 weeks would be interesting to people who were sort of lurking and not, and kind of not coming to the meetings, and then we'll just have a new one. Wow, thanks for posting that. There's the whole book. Interesting. Well, so so we've got a kind of an academic and a popular text, so we can compare that too. So we can have some, we can have a side conversation about, like we did actually during the Dawn of Everything. For whom is this being, who's the market? Who's the reader of this book?
So we're reading them at the same time. I missed that, or how does that work? And people can read 2 books at once. Yeah, I know, I'm joking, but yeah. So that's the idea. You guys are trying to mess with my brain, my first brain, let alone my second one.
We can read them both at the same time and then make connections between them.
Oh, fuck the connections! I'm looking forward to my third brain is what I'm really excited about.
Yeah, I think that I'm hoping that there will be some. I really haven't looked into either of them yet, but I'm kind of hoping that there will be some congruence between the two, and we can say, okay, these chapters would make sense to look at.
Is there any way of like sort of partitioning a vault, like just moving everything from the smarter notes, this book club, like into its own folder?
Yeah, sure.
And then using the same note, because then we can do individual things if we want to continue or link to it, but then we really focus on the new sort of collaborative, highlight oriented, reading oriented thing.
Yes, that is completely doable. I mean, basically all we do is we take everything that we have done here and we put it in a folder and then work outside of the folder.
I mean, unless there's some reason not to do that. Chris, maybe you can speak to that. I mean, I still haven't figured out how the book club's vault is going to relate to my working vault either. So I'm still still working on figuring out how the other one's working.
Yeah.
So
I mean, the way that you could do that is, basically you can go to Dropbox and actually just look at the folder and the notes as, just markdown files, and then just drag the ones you want.
Is there any way of linking? So like, we have the link to a note within a vault. Can you link to a note in another vault? I mean, that would be really handy to do.
only if it exists on the web. No, you can't link to a note in another vault that's not accessible by way of HTML, right? But if it's out on like Publish, for example, and so in back of my mind, the other thing I was thinking as I was saying, I could put this all in a folder within this. Within this book club folder, is I could also press the publish button on that. And so there would be a version of it, because it is going to freeze at some point, right? I usually leave it open for a week and then I kind of publish it, right? And then it becomes, and then that, which is not to say.
Does it have to be frozen if you publish? Publish just means it's either public or it's on the web, accessible to whatever permissions you give. Because publish doesn't have to be just totally public, right? It could be for a given group.
Right.
What about, the other question I have is, can you link to a folder instead of a note? Like oftentimes, I suppose you could have a map of content note in a folder and link to the map of content, but like, is it possible to actually just link to a folder? No.
I don't think so.
I think Curtis McHale, I watched something the other day where he has what he calls tag notes. And I thought, what is that? It's basically a note with one tag in it. But effectively, what that does is allow you to link to a tag. And if you can link to a tag, presumably you can link to a folder in some similar way. I don't know.
Yeah. Was that Chris and Simon, or Chris and Lewis were arguing about that a couple of weeks ago?
Well, there's a few things, and then another option we could do is to annotate and take notes using something like Hypothesis, and then there are methods for sucking all of that public data into a vault after the fact. Was another potential method. To Tracy's question about folders and vaults, so Dan's now done 2 separate book clubs in 2 separate vaults, and I can have a folder in my personal vault and put all the notes from both of those into it. And they, to some extent, will cross-link. A few of them may require a little massaging to make sure the paths to the notes are done properly so that they match. But you can do that and get all those links, and they'll cross-link both to each other as well as to anything else in my vault that might match. But that depends on, so in this one, I think we created a note for Luhmann's with that as the title, rather than my personal vault has Nicholas Luhmann as the top level. So those 2 won't match, but you can force it after.
But you can alias that, and then it will
alias it. And similarly, the last part, I think, if I'm remembering them all in order, you can link to, or at least on Windows, I can link to a folder, because I keep all my documents and books and journal articles in Calibre, or Calibre, if you prefer the alternate pronunciation. And those are linked to my Zotero file. So I can put a link in Zotero to the actual folder where the documents for that thing live. And it uses a browser link to go back and forth. So you can use that same browser link, and it's usually like a C drive link is probably the most common. So it'd be a capital C : / and then the path on your computer to that folder. And you can dump those same folder links into Obsidian and they should work. I know it does, at least on Windows systems, but I have not tried it in Mac or Linux environments. So, but I would presume those types of system-wide setups will work. when you click on it, it'll just open a browser window that goes to that file or sets of files.
The big unknown, the big unknown in this though is we don't yet, if we're going to use this plugin, the second, we don't quite know how that functions in relation to personal vaults. Is that correct? Or so that's, I mean, I quite like the idea of just putting this one in a folder so that we keep it and possibly link to it if things come up. But what I wasn't sure about, I got the impression from second was that we're each working in our own vaults, and then when something comes up, we add that to this shared space. But that's only my sort of brief impression from that plugin.
Right. The question is, can our own vaults that we're linking to be the shared vault?
That's my guess as to what it looks like, but I want to prove that this afternoon or in the next couple of days.
Yep.
I think the volunteers were Tracy and Gregory, so we'll see.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So that could be one of the things we try to figure out, whether second can help us work with the existing vault. Carrying it over somehow.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, it's interesting because I haven't thought about having more than one vault myself personally until just this week, right? Where I've been sort of flirting with that idea of, opening folders separately so I could see the graph of just them and all of that. And now I finally, this new research project on the radicals is actually living in its own vault, which is a little bit kind of unfortunate, right? Because then it doesn't talk to all of my sort of background history, so like if I'm talking about London radicals and there's a link to, the Wilk sites, then I've lost. So I think that scaling, I mean, this will be an interesting, this whole process of continuing continuing this vault for the book club, the next iteration of it. And I've also made a lot of, my chapter notes. I've done it myself in my own vault and then kind of just dragged it over to the shared vault as well.
In theory, we shouldn't need multiple vaults in the sense that, this is why Luhmann had the numbers before, the / right, was to kind of separate out sort of at least initially unrelated topics, but to preserve the possibility of making the connections with the, WikiLink his version of, WikiLinks.
Yeah.
But there is something, I agree that the initial impulse to create separate vaults and keep everything kind of orderly is one that almost, it's very seductive, and you kind of have to resist it in your permanent vault anyhow.
Yeah.
It seems. Yeah.
Well, and the beauty is that, of course, that it's easy to go back and forth. It's easy to drag that, just go to my Dropbox or iCloud and just, drag that back into where it was in the folder when I dragged it out of the folder. And then bam, there it is again. And all of those links that had gone dormant theoretically pop back into life, right? So that's cool. That does sort of presuppose that I have consistent naming conventions. But I guess if you do, if you just sort of figure that, kind of like Chris does, you use the words, you use the tags that you use, and then they, over time, you find out what it was that was most interesting to you by observing.
But I think it's a great idea of Tracy's to carry over the notes in some way so that we can continue to share how we're developing our own methods of working with the notes. Because I know I'm still, developing my system, and look forward to sharing that eventually.
Yeah. Okay. So I think what I'll probably do then is I will publish in about a week. I'll publish a version of this vault, and then it will remain open, and you can keep, you can basically keep working in it, and we'll then add a new place. We'll stop calling it Smart Notes Book Club, and we'll, just put a new title on it and call it something else, but it'll be the same place. Cool. Cool. That's good. I'm actually sort of impressed with myself that I'm following this conversation at this moment, because my brain is just a little bit fuzzy. John, that's a good question. I don't, basically so far I have just been scanning them, and actually I've got this thing that I'm scanning. I think that's great. It's a little, it's a cheap little Kodak thing that's designed for scanning negatives, but I just put a reel on one side and a reel on the other and scan away, and it's higher resolution than the professional microfilm microfiche scanners, which are only usually 9 to 18 megapixels, and this is 22. So I'm happy with it. I'm very happy with it so far, and I'm scanning them into files. I have very much avoided putting a lot of media in my vault, right? And I had this, I think, I don't remember who it was last book club. Somebody said their vault was like 50 gigabytes. And I just, because he had all his media in there. I usually keep my articles and things in attached to Zotero files. So I have that to go back to, and that's pretty close at hand. And then I have started putting some images in this new research that is going out onto a little published site of its own, just so that people can see what, these different things look like. But yeah, I don't know. Oh, that's good. That's good that I'll look at that podcast. So, cool. So what else is going on in the chat? What am I missing? Just trying to catch up. All of the different forms of communication that we're doing simultaneously here.
I think my vault is a whopping 4.7 megabytes. So
yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's beautiful because it's, it can be, I mean, I haven't really done that much with the mobile app either, but, I always think that, if I'm, that's actually been the beauty of this, of this scanning thing is then, then I can just sit, with my, on the couch with my iPad and, and read these things and highlight them. And it's very, it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, the reason I was asking is that it doesn't seem that Obsidian is the appropriate tool for every kind of need. Yeah. When you're talking about ideas. It seems to me an excellent tool for linking ideas that you write.
Yeah.
But in terms of well, you mentioned earlier about Kindle Readwise things showing up someplace. Is Obsidian the best place for that? For articles and things that I want copies of, I've been using Devontype. Because that seems to be a very nice thing and to use, and it has the AI to do searches and things like that. But trying to get one tool to do everything, it doesn't seem to work that way.
Yeah, yeah. I think excuse me. Yeah, I think that I had actually for a long time, I had sort of resisted even letting Readwise sweep my highlights, from Kindle or from Hypothesis into there at all, because I thought, no, I want this to be all about, my transcriptions, my translations of these ideas, so that would be, sort of on the way to becoming permanent notes. Since then, I have started doing it, but now I'm thinking that, maybe I'll do it less frequently because I am thinking more. I mean, over the course of this month, the thing that changed for me was I started really thinking more in terms of, these paragraphs being, little elements of, what will ultimately be output. And so it's not as, so I'm not as oriented around, this idea that I'm writing a book review on the Dawn of Everything or on, the Ahrens book or something like that. So if that is no longer the case, and that's no longer, it no longer needs to be in a long scroll, then the notes, then the highlights, and now of course that I've got my cool new pens and my cool new fake paper, I might just, write on little note cards. So,
the problem John is raising, or the issue, is one I, go back and forth on. I mean, right now I sort of have three major programs, right? Obsidian for the note taking. I manage also Zotero, right, for PDFs. But I also, for PDFs, often use DevonThink to collect just for collecting things.
Yeah.
And then Scrivener for writing. But and so there's, in my head, there's this distinction between the Obsidian Vault and the DevonThink database. But since DevonThink can open any folder and index it, right? There's really no reason to have separate locations, one for DevonThink and one for Obsidian. There's no reason to collect your scans and so forth into some kind of asset folder,
right?
And just have DevonThink point at that, because DevonThink can read Markdown and recognizes wiki links. So in a sense, what John is saying, that DevonThink could be used as a layer one occasionally uses to access your Obsidian Vault when you want to make use of the artificial intelligence and other features built into DevonThink. I mean, seems to me that might be the right way to go. I haven't gone that way yet because I'm still stuck in these being two different buckets, but that's kind of what I'm wrestling with. So I don't know
what are the other problems with Readwise going into Obsidian is if you backtrack, go back a chapter or two and start highlighting, making notes there, then when you do a connection to Obsidian, the order is wrong. You've got to delete the book. At least what I found. Maybe someone else has a solution. I'd love to hear this. But you have to delete the book and then import Readwise to get it in the right order. And if you got blocks linked, you lose the links.
If you've got blocks linked, if you've done the linking in Obsidian and then you delete it, yeah. But if you've double bracketed stuff in Kindle and Readwise has pulled those over, it'll do it again.
Yes, but I mean, if you're in Obsidian and you link it to a specific block back in Readwise, that block link is lost. Not a double bracket is different, right?
Okay, yeah. Oh, right. Using the
exclusion.
Reopening the Kindle so you can find your page and look at the context, kind of thing. Yeah. Yeah.
But then there's no Readwise to DevonThink, is there?
Well, isn't it Readwise when it's imported into Obsidian is a Markdown file, right?
Yeah.
So a DevonThink can read Markdown. So, but your point is that if you're not linking to a note, the link won't work in DevonThink.
Yeah, using the carets to link to blocks.
Right, exactly. That's what I mean.
Those get lost.
You can't do the block links or the header links as well, probably, but only the top level note links. Although, I haven't really looked at it, but that's my guess, at least with the wiki link functionality in DevonThink.
This is one of the bigger issues, and I've seen a few of the developers at higher levels starting to look at this. And there's one developer in, I think, the Netherlands who's making an effort to try and get everyone to kind of use compatible versions of Markdown. Because if you haven't come across it yet, there are about 70 flavors of Markdown out there, and they're all insanely different in stupid ways. And so all these tools who are using this simple text, and text is good for, longevity in moving things from one program to another, but it's these small, tiny subtleties where you lose links or you lose references from one thing to another that can be painful when using multiple tools. And so I'm, it's one of the things I'm always super careful about is either moving tools or moving to a new tooling set that isn't interactive or doesn't dovetail with the three other things that I'm using at the time.
Yeah.
Because suddenly then you could go down the rat hole nest of trying to reprocess 20 years of notes after you've been using one of these for a while. And then where are you stuck? So
Right. Yeah. Sounds like maybe I need to look at DevonThink, because I looked at it years ago and kind of got scared away and didn't pursue it. But
or some of them, don't have, and DevonThink, because it's been around for so long, has an older UI kind of interface for using it that may not look as modern and as sleek and as cool or simple as something like Obsidian that's been built in the last 2 years. So
yeah,
those are hard problems.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, I don't know that I would. It's kind of weird. I kind of like just having flat files for things like collections of PDF articles. Usually when I grab something, when I download something out of JSTOR or something, I give it a name, the year and the author, kind of naming thing. And then, so I can, so it's easy, even if it's not linked, even if it's not in Zotero, it's usually pretty easy for me to find, because, Spotlight will find it, right? So,
I actually use the same system, Dan. I just have them all in a single folder, and they're all just surname, year, and first word of the title. And I tend to suggest to PhD students that they try and gain that sort of sense of avoiding having things locked in software, partly because I just have to sort of shift those things too many times over the years. So at least that way I know exactly where they are, I know exactly how to find them, and there's no I'm not locked into a particular software. It does mean though the kind of sort of some of the possibilities with something like sort of kind of more importing notes directly from Zotero, for example, into Obsidian, that doesn't become available. But for me, I'm not wanting to automate any of that stuff, because automation means I'm just dumping information into something that I want to be working with slowly. So that's the kind of balance I have with that.
Yeah. Excuse me. Yeah, I agree. I think I was really lucky. I didn't realize it until just recently that I had when I started doing all this, I used EndNote, and then EndNote got bought by Thomson Reuters, and it all got ugly. And I still had a backup drive that had my EndNote libraries on them, and I just discovered that although I couldn't get access to the actual records, there was a folder full of the PDFs. and so I could still grab the PDFs out of there, right? At least. So so all of the PDFs that I had attached are all of a sudden back in my own. And I just, yeah, I did that thing. I put them in a folder, you know, so that they're, you know, they're not going anywhere.
So I'm not trying to make a pitch for Devon Think, but you can direct Devon Think to look at a flat file and it will index it. So you're not sucking it into anything. And then use all the power of the AI and the search and the links in Devon Think without ever touching the original files. So I just wanted that to be clear.
Well, that's kind of cool. That would be
say,
yeah. Because
John,
I know
that's sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, John, I was just going to say, yeah, so I index that folder. That folder gets indexed in Devon Think. So yeah, it's also, I'm able to search those PDF exactly like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry,
yeah.
Dan.
No, that's good. That's good to know. I didn't realize that, because that is yeah, I don't like having, I don't like duplicating that. I've never like written notes in Zotero either. It's sort of like, you know, why would I write notes in Zotero if I'm writing notes in Obsidian? You know, I don't, there are too many places to do this stuff. Right. And I'm thinking, you know, and I'm actually thinking, Gregory, that, you know, that Obsidian and Scrivener, there's a little bit of overlap there as well. But
the workflow I'm thinking of, you know, where I'm using the three is that as you say, you know, Devon Think is too clunky to make notes in. So you do all the actual note taking and connecting in Obsidian.
Yeah.
As far as notes go, though, if you open up your Obsidian Vault in Devon Think, you could use Devon Think's functionality to duplicate particular paths for a particular project in a separate folder. That makes that very easy without disturbing the original notes. Then you can carry over the duplicated notes, you know, that you've made in Devon Think into Scrivener, and that gives you sort of the initial sort of text structure within your writing app that you can then, I mean, if you took it Soren Hearn's method, you would just be writing then connecting sentences, but we know that's a little optimistic. Yeah. But but that would be kind of the workflow for using notes in a writing project that, you know, anyhow.
Yeah.
And I think we mentioned a book, you know, Karush wrote a book on Devon Think and you know, note taking, and he has sort of a kind of workflow, you know, at least for working with notes and duplicating them for a writing project in that book. If you looked at that, you know, that would work out at least one person's view of the details.
Yeah, that would be useful. Yeah, I do think that there's that something happens, a switch kind of turns when it's beginning to be output. And although I'll have to admit that earlier today, I was, you know, as I was transcribing this letter from this thing that I had scanned, I was doing it in Word. Right. So I don't even, you know, it's this long, I mean, it's this pages and pages of handwritten, you know, stuff from 1849, and I'm doing it in Word. So apparently I'm not going to put that in my vault. Maybe I don't know, maybe I will, maybe I'll cut and paste the whole thing in there. But then it's a primary source transcription. So it probably shouldn't be in there. Probably my notes about it should be in there. So yeah, continual work in progress. So we're really not going to get to see any, you're in a small room anyway.
The vibe's totally different when I'm in my bloody office with the washing in the background and, you know.
All right.
Special occasions only, or when I'm drunk. That's when the best dancing happens.
That's when my only dancing happens. All right, Cool. Well, then we have Tracy, Justin, Gregory, Simon, and I have volunteered to try to figure out this second. And so we'll do that. I will probably put some type of a notice out there announcing what we're going to do next and inviting people to join us. Okay.
How are we going to coordinate those of us that are testing second?
Can you hear me again?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry about that. I don't know why that happens. I mean, it wasn't.
So Gregory, are you in the Discord, or are you interested in joining the Discord? If not, we can just exchange.
Yeah, I can join
email.
the one Nate set up. I can.
Yeah.
I can join that. Sure. Yeah, I haven't yet, but I'm happy to do that.
All right. Yeah, I'll join it too.
Okay. Did we have a link? Is the link somewhere? Just so I.
Yeah, it's up.
If you scroll back, there's two links. There's an invite link, which Simon said didn't work for him, and then there's also a direct link to the channel. Okay. And then Nate is still here, so maybe he knows more about Discord than I do, because I don't know that much.
Yeah, that second link works for me.
All right.
I don't know a ton about it, but I mean, my students actually are the ones that got me using Discord, because none of them fucking use email.
Yeah.
And so this has worked for me, being in touch with them. And it's, it's just nice to have persistent chat. Really, I miss AOL Instant Messenger.
Yeah.
That's a different thing.
Yeah.
ICQ.
Yeah, there you go. But yeah, and if I'm not sure how to change permissions on the Discord, but if I can make everybody admin or however to do that, I'm not trying to own the Discord or anything.
I've found too that some of the value, and I think why people get lost in the Obsidian Discord, is it's a constant stream of a lot.
Yeah.
The tough part is it's great to have that kind of chat, but unless you've got a wiki or an open Obsidian vault where everyone's sharing things and compiling the best of the stuff into a central place, you're losing a lot of the value, because no one is going to go back to look at the Obsidian or to the Discord chat from 1.5 years ago to try and find that one crazy thing.
Right.
Or be able to find it even if they know it existed. So it's, and that's why it becomes a tough thing, is there can be some great conversations and interesting things come out of them, but unless you archive those somewhere else that are searchable and linkable, it's a lot.
Well, yeah, and also it's difficult because they kind of use it as their tech support, right? And so when you have a technical question, and I'm not always that happy to ask a technical question in the help, and then find myself in an archive of conversations where people may or may not have actually found the answer to the question.
By the way, I just installed that plugin, and there's actually a pretty good. It's a pretty good description of how it works on the install page. The
Cool.
second thing.
Okay. Great. Well, then that will be my first order of business as soon as I'm done partying with my daughter. So yeah, maybe I should have probably deliberately turned on the beat thing to get that dance going, but I didn't. So I'll probably just cut that out. I was able, I think, to cut it out of the last transcript and not have people forced to listen to that if they decide to revisit this on YouTube. So I'll do that this afternoon as well. And then this was fun. Thank you. And so shall we take a week off and then resume? Okay. So then I'll see you in a fortnight.
Okay.
All right. Thanks a lot. Take care.